Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Oh, we got people saying how it's a great place, right? It's such a great place. So definitely make sure that you donate if you know it. If you're not familiar with it, it's definitely a place to support. Okay, now can everybody see my screen? Let me know in the chat box. Yes, if you can see words that in big letters say alternative ways to reduce stress. Let me know if you can see that. Yes, beautiful. Yes, getting a lot of yeses. Perfect. Okay. So before we get started, I do want to just start by letting you know that there is a free download associated with everything that I'm going to be teaching today. So I'm going to drop that link here in the chat box so that you can download that. If you don't want to have to worry about taking 1,000,001 notes during today's training, you can just download that and kind of follow along. Beautiful. There is one more request that I have of you before we get started, and is that if you can keep your video on, I would love for you to keep it on because I am an energy person. I want to know if I'm boring you. I want to know if I'm exciting you, the whole 9 yards. And I will be asking you to raise your actual hand, or if you have your video off, your digital hand, or engage in the chat box. I will be asking quite a few questions throughout today's training. So I want to start off with a little raffle alert. So what you can do to enter to win this raffle is you can drop your email in the chat box. If you're watching us live on Facebook, find the Stress Less Company and DM us your email. You can drop your email in the chat box for the chance to win a $10 Amazon gift card. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and get started. And you can drop that email at any point during today's training. So what I'd love to do is start by telling you a little bit more about me. Is that all right with you guys? See some head nods? Beautiful. Perfect. So this is me when I was 12 years old. I was pretty cute. I know. But while I was really cute, this was actually a really difficult time in my life. Around this time, actually, a man was murdered in my home, and my mom was shot 3 times. Let's all take a deep breath in and let it out. Yeah. So that happened. Around this time, things weren't working out between my parents, and for one reason or another, they decided to go their own ways. And as we do when we go through breakups, separations, even divorces, when we feel ready, we start dating again. And that's exactly what my mom did. And she went on a date here and a date there and ended up meeting a guy where things were starting to progress. And as things started to progress, she started to notice something. Something was off. When she would look in this guy's eyes, there was something that just made her a little uncomfortable, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Now, my dad, being your typical overprotective dad, was basically like, ain't nobody gonna be around my kids unless I know what their deal is. And so he did a little research on this guy. And he found out through the grapevine that this guy actually had an extensive history of domestic violence. And so he went to my mom and he said, look, I know you didn't know. There's no way you could have known. But he said, please just be careful. And so my mom had a decision to make. And as you might have guessed, she had no interest in being put in an awkward position like that. And so she decided, you know what? I want to be here for my kids, for myself and my older sister. And I certainly want to be here for myself in the long run. And so she went to that boyfriend and she said something we've probably all heard or said at some point in our lives. She said, you know what? It's not you, it's me, right? I thought I was ready, but I just not. And again, As we do when we go through breakups, separations, divorces, again, when we feel ready, we start dating again. And that's exactly what my mom did when she felt ready. And went on a date here, a date there. And again, she met a guy where things were starting to progress. This guy was a good apple, if you will. But the problem was that ex-boyfriend never stopped paying attention. And a few weeks later, that ex-boyfriend broke into my childhood home, killed my mom's new boyfriend, and tried to kill my mom. This guy shot my mom point blank in the back of her head, in her L5, in her spine, and through her arm. She was not supposed to survive. I remember being in the hospital as a kid and listening to the doctors talk to the adults, and the doctors telling the adults in my family, look, this woman has a 3% chance of surviving. We're literally just keeping her alive right now. There was conversations about pulling the plug because we weren't sure if she was going to make it. But the good news is that if you saw her today, you would have absolutely no idea that she had been through all of that. She basically made a full recovery. If you saw her today, all you would see is a pair of reading glasses and a slight limp. That is it. But while my mom basically made a full recovery, I really struggled for a long time, right? As you can imagine, a 12-year-old girl, her childhood home had been broken into. A man was murdered in her house. Her mom was now in medically induced coma. She was shifted from living with her mom to living with her dad. And if all of that wasn't enough, I was a teenage girl. And so as a result, I ended up struggling with the symptoms of PTSD, night terrors, jumpiness, fear. I struggled with stress, anxiety, overwhelm, all of it. I mean, you name it, I was probably struggling with it. And honestly, I felt like my mind was just trying to tear me apart from the inside out. And I have to be honest with you. It took me a while to get the courage to even tell anybody that I was struggling. I thought that I would be the straw that broke the camel's back in my family. I thought that if I came to people that I would be a burden. But when I finally got the courage to reach out, I would say things to people like, you know, hey, I'm kind of feeling stressed, or I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or I'm kind of struggling right now. And it was like clockwork. Well, first of all, I would ask people for advice. I'd tell them these things and I would ask people for advice, but it was like clockwork that I got the same 5 or so responses every single time. Hey, Carlee, have you tried therapy? Have you tried yoga? Have you tried meditation? Have you tried changing your diet? Have you hit the gym recently? That always works for me. And the reality was that I was so desperate for change that I had tried all of that. In my mind, when people would say that, I was thinking, no shit, Sherlock. Pardon my French. And some of the stuff, I got to be real, it didn't work at all. But some of the stuff worked a little bit. But nothing ever got me over that hump where I was experiencing things like happiness and joy and silliness and goofiness and all of those beautiful states of mind. And as a result, I ended up struggling as a result of continually showing up and doing things that I knew didn't work for me. I ended up struggling for 10 years. I ended up struggling for 10 years until I found the thing that worked for me. Now, I'm going to share in today's training what that thing was that worked for me, but for now, we're going to put a little pin in that. But I ended up struggling for 10 years until I found that thing. And now, because I found that thing, I've been able to help hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of professional women and men around the globe to figure out exactly what works for them to reduce stress and live a more joyful life. Even during a worldwide pandemic, even when we have a business, even when we've got kids that are driving us crazy and e-learning and all of the other stuff that might be going on in our lives. So I want to be clear who this training is for. Who is this for? I want you to know if you're in the right place. Now I'm going to go through a few bullets here, and I want you to let me know in the comments in the chat if each of these bullets resonates for you. You can just put a yes if it resonates. So here's the first one. Now, if you have your video on, please raise your hand. I know that's so much easier. So here's the first one. Let me know if you've ever gotten sick from being stressed out. Raise your hand, drop it in the chat box. Ever gotten sick from being stressed out? Thank you for the digital hand raises as well, Claire. Okay, thank you. And by the way, if any of these bullet points really resonate with you, you can do one of these. This is a double hand raise, like, yep, this is me, you're talking about me. All right, here's the second bullet. If you've ever snapped at a loved one because you were overwhelmed. And this is why I said this, because I was very good at this. Yeah. Let me know in the chat box. Beautiful. Thank you. Got some more digital hand raises. Thank you. If you've ever missed an important detail at work because you were just running around like crazy, running around like a chicken with your head cut off, if you will, raise your hand. Thank you. You can lower your hands. Or if stress has ever had a negative impact on your life, raise your hand. Yes, thank you. So if you raise your hand, whether physically, digitally, or in your mind's eye, you are in the right place. Thank goodness you are in the right place. Now, my intention is to give you as much information as I possibly can in the next 30 minutes. But I can't teach you everything I know. Otherwise, we'd be here for probably months. But don't worry, I won't leave you hanging. I'll be showing you how you can get the rest of the information at the end of this talk. So where are we going in the next 30 minutes? What is our journey? Well, we're going to start with answering the question, what is stress and how does it show up? I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. Then we're going to go into what the heck do we do about it? That thing I put a pin in a little bit earlier. And then I'm going to teach you my 4-step repeatable system for managing stress so that you can find what uniquely works for you. Let's get started, shall we? What is stress? Well, quite frankly, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of definitions of stress. The therapists, the psychologists, even the stress management experts don't seem to agree on a singular definition. And so rather than reading you 1,001 definitions, I picked 2 that really resonated with me and resonate with the work that I do with my clients. So here's my second favorite definition of stress. It is physical, mental, or emotional strain or tension. And if you're taking notes, I would write that down. And if you'd rather not take notes, I'm going to drop that download link one more time. Physical, mental, or emotional strain or tension. I want to see by hand raises or in the chat box, how many of us have ever felt tension in our shoulders or maybe in our backs or somewhere in our bodies? Raise of hands. Yes, beautiful. That's stress. How many of us have ever, thank you for the hand raise, Linda. How many of us have ever laid awake in bed at night and the wheels were going a million miles a minute? We were thinking about that email or that conversation that could have gone differently, all the stuff we have to do tomorrow. Raise the hands. Yes, I got a chat that says yes. Thank you. Stress. Now, that's my second favorite definition. Here's my first favorite. It is a condition or feeling experienced when a person perceives that the demands exceed the resources they are able to mobilize. So a condition or feeling experienced when we perceive that the demands exceed the resources we are able to mobilize. AKA, I can't handle this. I don't have what it takes. So you're probably wondering at this point why I have a picture of a little Lego man on the right side of my slide. I promise you there is a reason for that. And it's actually to demonstrate exactly what stress is versus what stress isn't. So let's take a moment and let's just imagine for a second that we are that little Lego man. We are looking up and there is a giant human foot right above us and it is about to step on us. Here's what is stress. We're looking up at that human foot and we're thinking, that's a human, that's huge. I'm just a little Lego man. I'm screwed. I'm done. He believes that he couldn't handle it. That is stress. Now here's what is not stress. Let's say we're that little Lego man again. We're under that human foot and we're looking up. But this time we look to the left or we look to the right and we shimmy on out of the way. We believe that we could handle it. It's not stress. Now there is a third, probably more realistic scenario here. And let's imagine for a second that that human foot does not have a sneaker on it. And we are that little Lego man again. And here's what we're thinking. Come on. We all know who's going to win here. I'm a Lego. You're a human foot. You're going to be limping the rest of the day. Again, it's not stress because he believed that he could handle it. But here's the real problem. The real problem is how stress shows up. Trouble concentrating, social withdrawal, irritability. We saw how many hands raised at snapping at loved ones, right? I had to do a double one when I get stressed. The use of unhealthy coping mechanisms. How many of us, I want to see a raise of hands or let me know in the chat box, how many of us have ever eaten or drank our feelings before? Yeah. Hands are going up. Private messages are coming through. Absolutely. Thank you. It can show up in insomnia, headaches, anxiety, depression, and that's not even getting into the crazy, scary stuff that we hear about all the time, right? Cardiovascular disease, heart attack, strokes. And so I would argue that stress is ruining our lives. It's not only ruining our health, but it's ruining our relationships. It's getting in the way of us growing our businesses, of taking our careers to the next level. It's getting in the way of quite a lot. And so that takes us to the next part of our journey. And that is answering the question, what the heck do we do about it? What the heck do we do about it? Well, we're finally going to take that pin out that I put in earlier when I told you what worked for me, right? I found the thing that worked for me. And that thing that worked for me, and I'm going to see if I can erase this little, there we go. My inner OCD child was driving me crazy. All right. The thing that worked for me at the time was drawing. I would draw out my night terrors. I would sketch out my feelings. And when I was angry, you can dang right guess that I was putting that pen to paper and moving it all around. Drawing, art, was the thing that worked for me. But here's the thing. For everybody who's internally panicking right now, because you're thinking to yourself, I can barely draw a stick figure, let alone anything else. Please don't let this training be about how art can help me stress less. Don't worry. I'm not going to be talking about how art can help you manage your stress. This was just the smaller piece of the puzzle, the bigger picture. And what I discovered was actually this thing called creative stress reduction. And again, if you're taking notes, I would write this down. Creative stress reduction. What the heck is that? Well, creative stress reduction is any activity that gets us out of fight, flight, or freeze mode and gets us into a state of play or flow. So any activity that gets us out of fight, flight, or freeze mode and into a state of play or flow, AKA it gets us into rest and digest mode. So this can literally be anything at all. It can be fitting your adult-sized body into a child-sized turtle shell at the aquarium. And by the way, I wish that you could see the little boy's face up here. He looks horrified, and I was very, but I had to crop him out for his privacy. It could be turning your car into an office because you really need a day at the beach. It can be cooking a healthy meal and being so excited about it that not only do you take a selfie, but you drop a picture of a minion on that selfie. And yes, I do look cute with longer hair as well. And it can even be going on a hike. Where am I going to put my feet? Where am I going to put my hands? The whole 9 yards. Now, here's the thing. It can also even be formatting an Excel spreadsheet if that's what you're into. Anything goes. Screaming can be it too. Shout out to D. Yeah. So I'm going to share a story with you about a client, former client actually. She was a big deal at a big local university. She managed a team, she did research, she managed an entire course load, which meant hundreds of students. And on top of that, she had a side hustle. And on top of that, she had family. And on top of that, there was so much going on. And so she was prone to getting stressed out. She had a lot on her plate. But when she found herself in a stressed state, something happened. She would become the world's most indecisive leader. She wasn't able to decide what to delegate. She didn't even know what her priorities were for the day. She would push herself through her day with resistance and hardly get anything done until she found creative stress reduction. And she went through this process and she discovered that dancing was her creative stress reduction. Now for her, it was turning on her favorite 80s song for 15 to 30 seconds and dancing like nobody's watching. Now, luckily for her, she had a private office with no windows, so she could make that happen. But when she took that just 15 to 30 seconds, what would happen is that when she sat down, she would be a completely different woman, a completely different professional. She would be able to delegate like that. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, I'm going to do this, meet back in an hour. She would be able to specify and really clearly define her priorities and move through her day with ease, not resistance. And not only that, she was finally not taking the stress of her job home to her family anymore. So as you can imagine, it's pretty important to step out of fight, flight, or freeze mode. That's just one example. Now, I do want to share another example just to drive this point home. When we are in fight, flight, or freeze mode, we can create a completely different perspective of the world around us. I had another client who a few weeks ago, she came to me and she said, "Thank goodness, Carlee, that you told me about creative stress reduction. Thank goodness I figured out what works for me." And I said, "Okay, okay, well, give me some context. I know creative stress reduction is great, but please give me some context here. And she said, well, the other night, my partner and I were watching a movie and his phone buzzed. His phone went off. And he picks up his phone and he kind of leans away and he's texting. And immediately I get triggered, right? She says, immediately I get triggered into fight, flight, or freeze. He's cheating on me, that MFer. You can tell it how it is. I'm going to pack up his stuff, throw it on the lawn. That's it. I'm done. And then she realized she was in fight, flight, or freeze. And she realized, oh, wait, hold up. I'm in fight, flight, or freeze. I need to do some creative stress reduction before I take any action here. And so for her creative stress reduction was pretty simple. Just go on a walk. Walk around the house or walk around the block. It doesn't even have to be that long. And so she looked at her partner and she said, look, like, hey, babe, can I have just like 5 minutes? I need some fresh air. Do you mind if we just pause the movie? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever, no problem. And so she goes on a walk. And as she's on the walk, she's focusing on just being there and breathing and focusing. And that was her creative stress reduction. And she comes back. And she comes back in the room and she says to her partner, she says, hey, babe, who texted you? And he goes, oh, right. Yeah, that was my daughter. She wants your lasagna recipe. She was ready. Remember, she was ready to tell him how it is, call him an MFer, pack his stuff, throw it on the lawn, leave him, never see him again. And his daughter wanted her lasagna recipe. That can be the power of fight, flight, or freeze. It can completely shift our perspective and sometimes even create narratives and stories that are just not true. So the question then becomes, how do I find the creative stress reduction that works for me? Right? How do I find that so that I don't have to stay in fight, flight, or freeze? Well, that's where we get to the next step in our journey, which is the 4-step repeatable system for managing stress. The 4-step repeatable system that's going to help you figure out what uniquely works for you. So let's get started. Here is the first step. You're going to start by writing down a list of 50 to 100 activities that you love doing. 50 to 100 activities that you love doing. And again, anything goes. No editing, by the way. Anything goes. So I want to hear from you guys in the chat box or in the comments, depending on where you're watching this training. What is it that you love doing? What activities do you love doing? So I will start by sharing. It might be, for me at least, I love playing with my dog. I like going for walks. Sometimes I like a glass of wine. Now it could also be formatting an Excel spreadsheet, gardening, yoga. Stacy says cooking, walking, shopping. Donna says hanging with the girlfriends, walks, dancing. Now here's the key point here. The key piece here in this step is that there is no editing in this process. So you can put down the wine, you can put down the hanky-panky. You can also put down playing with your dog and painting and all of that, but no editing in this process, because here's what can happen. We've got our pen and paper. We're making our list. And we write down going on a walk, hanging with friends, and then our brain goes wine. And we're like, no, don't write that. That's not healthy. Don't write that. And we try to move on to the next item on our list. And yet our conscious brain is going, wine, please just wine. And you're like, no, I need another idea. And your brain keeps saying wine, right? So no editing during this process. Put it all down. So you can move beyond that. I got a few more shares in here. Reading is thebomb.com. Enjoying nature, beach time, talking to your mom, shopping, eating, Funny movies, rom-coms. I'm right there with you. I don't know who commented that, but I'm right there with you from Facebook. Yeah. So you've just created the first part of your list. So make sure that if you have pen and paper in front of you, you're writing those down. Walking with dogs, creating fancy desserts. Catherine, we should hang out. Listening to music, gardening, the beach. Yeah. So once you have your list of 50 to 100 activities that you love doing, you're ready to move on to step 2. Step 2 is to narrow your list down to items that are not only healthy for you, but accessible by asking 4 really important questions. So here's the first question. The first question that you're going to ask to narrow your list down is you're going to ask, does this activity have the potential to put myself or someone else in harm's way? Maybe we can also shift this question in the world we live in today to being, could I get sick or could someone else get sick? If the answer is yes, you're going to cross that item off. The second question that you're going to ask is, does this activity have the potential to trigger me? Does this activity have the potential to trigger me? Now, there is a key nuance to this question. We have our big T trauma trigger and we have our little t trigger. And I want to go through the difference of those just very briefly. So I had a client who was a survivor of sexual assault. And when she was doing that first step, creating her list, a lot of her friends said, hey, you got to go get a massage. Oh my gosh, it's going to make your body feel so good. Your mind's going to feel so relaxed. Oh, you got to go to the spa. You got to get a massage. And yet she knew that even when a friend would grab her hand just to pull her into a conversation or to another room, that sometimes that made her incredibly uncomfortable and even triggered her into fight, flight, or freeze mode. So she wasn't sure if getting a massage was going to trigger her. She just knew based on her past trauma and experience that it might. And so for her, we crossed that item off. Now, it doesn't mean that she can't explore getting a massage, but it does mean that it's not her creative stress reduction activity because, again, remember, the point is to get us out of fight, flight, or freeze and into play or flow or rest and digest. So that's the big T. We're talking trauma, big T trigger here. Then we have little t. I just had a conversation with another woman. Well, I say just, but it was probably about June or July. It's been a while. And she was talking about how she had the quarantine 15 going on. And her item on her list was going to the beach. She loved the beach. But she had that quarantine 15 going on. And she knew around the time June, July, that when she goes to the beach, there's a lot of 18-year-olds in their eeny-teeny bikinis. And in the past, she's found herself comparing herself, telling herself she's got to go on a diet, exercise more, da-da-da-da-da-da. It prevented her from enjoying thoroughly her experience at the beach. So for her, we crossed the beach off. Little t trigger. It just didn't allow her to get into play or flow. It didn't serve her. So does this activity have the potential to big T or little t trigger me? If the answer is yes, you're going to cross it off. The third question that you're going to ask is, does this activity fit into my resources? Does this activity fit into my financial resources, my time resources, my social resources? Now, the financial is pretty obvious. We're not putting stuff on the credit card because the credit card is going to haunt us for the next 6 to 12 months until we pay it off, creating more stress. The one thing that I do want to point out here is especially for parents. Do you have the time resources for this activity or do you have the social resources? Is there someone who's willing to watch your kids for a week? Is there someone who's willing to watch your kids for an hour? Right? Being really realistic about what resources that you have accessible to you right now. If this activity does not fit into our resources, we're going to cross it off. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't plan for it. Doesn't mean you can't save money for that fancy vacation. Doesn't mean you can't work out the details within your social life to get someone to watch your kids. But right now, it means that is not accessible to you if it's not in your time or social resources or financial resources. Here's the last question. If I did this activity every single time I was stressed out, would it be healthy? If I did this activity every single time I was stressed out, would it be healthy? So there goes the wine, there goes the cookies, there goes all of that. And if you're honest with yourself and in integrity with this process, what you should be left with are items that are healthy and accessible to you right now. So I want to hear in the chat box or in the comments, what did you eliminate from your initial share, from your initial list? What did not make the cut? I know for me, my 30-minute to 60-minute naps never made the cut. I love them dearly. They did not make the cut. What did not make the cut? Now, here's the thing while you guys are typing. If you're lucky through this process, you'll be left with 10 to 15 creative stress reduction activities that you can start exploring. If you're not so lucky, you'll be left with 1 or 2. But regardless, the next step is going to lead you into that exploratory process. You're going to circle the items that are left that you're most excited about, and you're going to take action. Because otherwise, right, all we have is a piece of paper. Food and treats did not make it through. That meal did not make it through. No more snacks, no more shopping. That one always makes me laugh. Retail therapy does not make it through. Snacking, 100%. Okay, so we take action. We start exploring. What's next? What's after that? Well, that's step 4. It's to continue doing what works, right? When you come back from exploring and you find that hanging out with friends really helps you step out of fight, flight, or freeze mode, you're going to add that to your tool belt. Maybe reading for 15 minutes, that works for you. Add it to your tool belt. It can be more than one thing, by the way. You can have a whole tool belt filled with stuff that works for you. But let's say you go and explore and it doesn't work for you. You're going to abandon that ASAP. One of the reasons I ended up struggling for 10 years was because I kept showing up and doing stuff that I knew didn't work. Just because it works for the masses doesn't mean it necessarily works for you. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means that you have a unique remedy, just like every one of us. So let's say, for instance, you have going on a walk on your list. And on that walk, the entire time you're thinking about all the stuff you have to do, and you got to check this email, and you got to do that, and you got to do this, and oh my goodness, it would be so much less stressful if I was just in front of my freaking computer. If you have that thought process while doing an activity, you're going to come back from that walk, you're going to go to your list, you're going to take a pen, or even better, a Sharpie, and you're going to cross that item off. It does not work. And when needed, should you run out of creative stress reduction ideas, you can always return to step 1 and maybe even include a friend in the brainstorming process. Now, what I've taught today in this training is just the first step in creating a truly stress-less life. Creative stress reduction is just the first step. There are many steps beyond that. Once we're out of fight, flight, or freeze mode, we are really primed to take that additional action to create that lasting change. right? To get to the root of chronic stressors and pull them out. You know, this is the hard part, right? The next part is the hard part. And it's why many clients decide to work with me. How do I get rid of the stress that keeps triggering me back into fight, flight, or freeze mode over and over and over again? Right? That's the deep work. And that's the reason why I want to offer each and every one of you here in the Zoom meeting the opportunity to chat one-on-one with me for a complimentary stress assessment, where we will look at what is causing stress, what is causing overwork, what is causing exhaustion in your life, and I will hold energetic space for you. And I will listen deeply. And together, we will get to the root of why you haven't found the peace and the freedom that you desire yet. Because let's be honest, it's costing you a lot. If we go back to the symptoms that we talked about earlier, trouble concentrating, that affects our productivity, our money, our time. Social withdrawal, irritability, that affects our family, our friendships, our clients. Circle back to money. It affects our jobs, our careers. It affects our health and takes years off of our lives. And if all of that is not enough, it's affecting your happiness and your peace of mind. And so I want you to imagine for a second what your life would look like if you had less stress. If you weren't so dang tired all of the time. If you didn't snap at loved ones or colleagues. If you didn't get sick or end up with migraine headaches or any of those other health concerns. And I want you to imagine what your life would look like if you had more peace of mind. If you were happier, if you were able to focus at the task at hand and get stuff done. And if you had an abundance of energy. And I can promise you, you will leave this conversation with clarity. You're going to know exactly what's causing your stress. Really, what's the real deep-rooted reason? You're going to leave feeling heard and knowing that you are supported. And let's be honest, that is not very common these days. And you're going to leave knowing that you do not have to deal with the bull crap that is chronic stress the rest of your life. And so if you want to sign up for a complimentary session, stress assessment with me, you are going to click the link here. I'm going to drop here in the chat box. Now, this link takes you directly to my calendar so that you can choose a time and a date that works for you. All you have to do is enter your name, email, and phone number. Now, if you're watching this on Facebook, don't worry, I did not forget about you. You can also apply for a complimentary stress assessment by visiting stresslessco.com. And a member of my team will get in touch with you should it be a good fit. Now, I'm going to give you just a second to wind down to click that link if you're feeling called. And then we're going to return back to the raffle item. So for those of you who dropped your emails, I'm going to go ahead and give you another, for those of you who didn't drop your emails, I'm going to go ahead and give you another 5 seconds to drop your email if you want to be included in the chance to win this $10 Amazon gift card. So 5, 4, got some last minuters, love it. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's see what we got here. I'm going to do a little turning away, random scrolling. And I landed on our host, so I'm going to try again here. And landed on the host again. Man, Shelly. Let me try one more time. Is it Chris? Chris, congratulations. You are the winner of the $10 Amazon gift card. So keep an eye out in your inbox for that here in the next 24 to 48 hours. Beautiful. Now, I want to leave you with one last thing before we open up for Q&A. And it is this. Life has no limitations except for the ones that you make. It's up to you to find the creative stress reduction activities that work for you. It's up to you to take action. It's up to you to ask for help if you need it. Thank you guys so much. And I'm absolutely going to keep an eye on the chat. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. And I believe we're monitoring the Facebook page as well. So if you want to drop them in the chat on Facebook, we can do that as well. So any questions? Oh, and let me stop my share so you can see my beautiful face. Okay. Beautiful. So keep in mind in that stress assessment, we can absolutely go through any personal questions that you have. I know that this is very near and dear to our hearts. We've got a lot going on. You are quite welcome. Thank you. Yes. Okay, let's see. We got a question. What are your thoughts on meditation for stress? So I'm neutral. This was a Facebook question. So I'm neutral. It can be great. It can be not so great. I've had clients where it's been life altering. And I've had clients where focusing on their breath sends them into a panic attack. And so it's really, for me, about what works best for you, knowing yourself. And let's say you're on that other end of the spectrum, but one day you do want to meditate, that's okay too. But you can use creative stress reduction to start a smaller mindfulness practice to get there. Or if you're not really interested, that's cool too. That's totally okay. So I'm pretty neutral. It's really about you figuring out what works for you. Let's see. How does hormone levels impact stress? Well, I can tell you how stress impacts hormone levels. It can trigger cortisol, and it can trigger the adrenaline. Sorry, I'm losing my words here. And the result of that is really about cutting off the vessels. So your blood vessels, actually, when you are in a stress state, when the adrenaline and the cortisol is going off in your body, your blood vessels actually constrict. So your blood's having trouble moving through your body. And so your body and your subconscious and your conscious mind is actually fighting itself to rise to the occasion. So that's also one of the important reasons for creative stress reduction, right? Because when you are able to be more grounded, your blood vessels expand, your body is able to support you in rising to the occasion. And there is such thing as good and bad stress. So there's distress and then there's eustress. And we could have a whole nother conversation about that, Betty. You know, one other thing to note about chemical responses in the body and stress is, I'm sure we've all heard this, but caffeine. Caffeine can actually trigger a stress response with no actual trigger. We don't need something to be stressed about. Caffeine can actually create an anxious response in the body. So that's a great question. Betty, just to be clear, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist, or a psychotherapist, so I don't know the chemical responses. That's not where I'm trained. I'm really trained in the how to manage it. But that was a really great question, because there's so much that can go into that, just hormonally, that can cause stress. Linda, did you have a question? I saw just a letter pop through. All right, so thank you guys so much for coming. Don't forget to grab that stress assessment or apply for it, depending on where you're watching this, if you have any questions that you don't want to share with the group at large. And we hope to see you at another Girls Night In online. Have a great day, everybody.